On this episode of China Uncensored, why does China hate Japan? Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. So, China and Japan are once again at each other's throats over the Diaoyu, or Senkaku Islands, as they're known in Japan. If you need a catch-up, check out last week's episode, China's Diaoyu Senkaku Islands Air Defense Fun Zone. Go on, I'll wait. Okay, so does China really hate Japan? Well, according to a survey done by an NPO specializing in Japanese political, diplomatic, economic, and social issues, China and Japan really don't like each other. Of the Chinese people polled, over 90% had an unfavorable impression of Japan. 3/4 said the biggest reason was the Diaoyu Islands territorial dispute, and almost 2/3 said it was because Japan has never apologized for its invasion of China. China and Japan have a long history together. For a while, they were pretty tight. Particularly during the Tang Dynasty, China's golden age, China had a huge influence on Japanese culture. A lot of what we think of when we talk about Japan today, like Zen Buddhism, kanji, ramen, the kimono, and even the architecture, can all be traced back to Chinese roots. Japan was kind of like China's brother from another mother, only it turns out instead of being like the Wright brothers, the Marx brothers, or even the Mario brothers, they were a little more like Romulus and Remus. They're the mythological twin brothers, suckled by she-wolves as babes. They would go on to set up their own cities before a territorial dispute comes between them and one kills the other. There's a reason we talk about the ancient empire of Rome instead of the ancient empire of Rheims. So despite the close ties, in 1633, Japan closed itself off from the outside world under the Tokugawa shogunate, which was the feudal military government in charge at the time. It wasn't until U.S. Commodore Perry sailed up to the Japanese capital of Edo in 1853, pointed his guns at the capital and said, "Open up or we'll utterly destroy you," that Japan reconsidered its position. At this point, China and Japan were basically in the same boat. Industrialized Western forces were knocking at their doorstep, ready for some good old imperialism. I mean trade. Would you like to buy some opium, by the way? I know a guy. For a detailed account on how China responded to the West, check out my episode, The Cost of European Imperialism in China. Japan responded with the Meiji Restoration, and in a few decades was able to rapidly modernize. Now, at the time they thought, wouldn't it be great if there was a major power in the East, steeped in Confucian tradition, a distinctly Asian force to rival that of the West? Well, you can't trust the Chinese to do it. They're all addicted to opium. So why not Japan instead? And thus began Japan's imperial ambitions. The First Sino-Japanese War saw Japan and China pitted against each other for the first time since Kublai Khan's Mongolian Yuan dynasty attempted to invade. In this latest encounter, Japan's forces decimated Chinese forces and took Korea and annexed Taiwan. In the West, everyone was sure China would win, and so they were like, wow, pretty good work, Japan. Then after the Boxer Rebellion, Japan demanded kind of ridiculous war reparations from China, and the West was like, okay, you're going a little too far there, bring it in a little bit. Then Japan fought Russia in the Russo-Japanese War over Inner Mongolia and Manchuria that led to Japan crushing a major Western power, and the West was like, 1910, Japan annexed Korea. 1915, Japan presented China with 21 demands, the king of unequal treaties that would have extended Japan's sphere of influence throughout Manchuria and Inner Mongolia, and even would have given Japan control over China's police force. And the West was like, okay, you're really going too far, even for us. And suddenly Japan found itself with strained relations with everyone. But following World War I and the Great Depression, reining in Japanese imperial ambitions didn't really seem like such a high priority. So following World War I, Japan was given Shandong, the home of Confucius, even though European powers had promised to return the German-occupied province to China if they helped during the war. So now China hates Japan, Japan hates China, and everyone hates the West. And during all of this, Japan had shown little squeamishness about executing and beheading Chinese civilians after capturing cities in Liaoning and Manchuria. But as the West withdrew, Japan was left as the unchecked power in Asia. It was time to expand. In 1931, in what became known as the Mukden Incident, the Japanese army set up dynamite around one of its own railroads in Mukden, modern-day Shenyang. They blamed it on Chinese dissidents and used the attack as an excuse to invade all of Manchuria. The ruse was quickly exposed, but instead of removing its forces, Japan withdrew from the League of Nations, an international organization established after World War I to maintain peace and continue to control Manchuria. Only Italy and this guy said it was legal. Now, in Japan in the late 1930s, the military had effectively staged a coup and grabbed near total control over the country. So it turns out unchecked imperial ambitions, nationalism, and an out-of-control military are a pretty bad combination. And that begins World War II, or the Second Sino-Japanese War as it applies to Japan. Japan sweeps through Southeast Asia, leaving a trail of devastation. Besides using young women in the regions they conquered as comfort women, read gunpoint prostitution. The brutality in dealing with civilians went off the scale. The most famous example is what's called the Rape of Nanking. Now, I won't go into the details because it's pretty awful. Nanking was China's wartime capital and refuge for civilians fleeing from war around the country. When Japanese forces broke through, they began a campaign of mass rape and killings. 20,000 women, including infants and the elderly, were more or less raped to death. But that's even just a drop in the bucket next to the total number of casualties, between 250 and 300,000. Coincidentally, that's about the number of people killed in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it certainly wasn't just China. All throughout Southeast Asia, Japan committed horrendous war crimes that are still a source of resentment and bitterness, made worse by the fact that Japan has never apologized for those war crimes. There are even Japanese nationalists who say the Nanking Massacre was exaggerated or entirely made up. So I think you now know why the Chinese people might have a problem with Japan. But here's the thing. The CCP has been manipulating these emotions for decades. Anti-Japanese propaganda movies are just a part of the education system in China. The CCP wants to keep this hate alive because they can use it to distract the masses whenever their own, far more brutal, bloody regime is threatened. The CCP uses legitimate grievances and whips it up into dangerous nationalistic fever so no one realizes that the real problem facing China today, not China 60 years ago, is the CCP. The Diaoyu Islands are just another distraction. But I think I have a great solution to the whole Diaokaku Island thing. Japan, not Prime Minister Shinzo Abe because he's the most militant Prime Minister Japan has had in modern times, but Japan should apologize for what they did during World War II. That's just something that has to happen. Then, as a sign of goodwill, give the Diaoyu Islands back, but to Taiwan. The Republic of China was the one at war with Japan in World War II, so it would be appropriate, but it would infuriate the CCP. Not only won't they be able to argue Japan is keeping Chinese territory, but Japan will have also acknowledged Taiwan diplomatically, and the CCP hates that. I am a modern-day Henry Kissinger. What do you guys think? Comment below and be sure to check out the Facebook and Twitter page. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.